how does the organization define the purpose? And more importantly, let's first then come to the individual. So two
Yep.
questions. Um,
Yeah. Well, let's start with the organizational purpose because I think this sets the context for everything that's going on right now for, Gen Z and frankly for millennials, and frankly for even my generation, Gen X. I think we were in this position back when I was coming into the workplace of realizing that we were looking for more meaning than what the generation above us seemed to care about. But we were a small cohort, are a small cohort, surrounded by baby boomer energy, all in our early part of our career, which is a really big gap between those two generations, in terms of our experiences. And so, we kinda came in with this question mark about sort of meaning and purpose in our workplace, and it was sort of, like, not answered for a long time, and it became, for me, a sort of a blinking light that stayed on all the time in my mind, and why I kind of ended up devoting my life to it. But let me talk about org purpose first. I think, when I was at Coca-Cola in the mid-1990s, here's a company that makes lots of money selling essentially sugary beverages, right? And, but it is an organization that has an amazing, history. It's got, fantastic talent. It's global. There's a lot of things that are very exciting about that business. Um, it has an amazing brand, probably one of the most amazing brands over, in ever. Um, but my generation was in there kind of going, well, hey, CEO at the town halls, what's our purpose? And we were summarily told the purpose of Coca-Cola is to maximize shareholder value. Now, that is not wholly untrue, but it's a dangerous half-truth is what, we've learned. And the reason it's a dangerous half-truth is if I'm gonna be really, really a hard-nosed, let's say, institutional investor and look at it purely through the lens of value, that answer is not satisfying to me. And the reason it's not satisfying is because it's undifferentiated. It's not telling me anything. Everyone is telling me that they're there to maximize shareholder value. So why should I care about investing in Coca-Cola? So, the very first thing I wanna debunk is this idea that somehow that's an answer to what a purpose is in an organization. It's not even a good answer from the perspective of institutional investors, even ones that I talk to. They're like, "No, that's not telling you anything," right? So, then what is it, right? And I think who really framed this, and one of the people who inspired us to write the book, my colleague Sudhanshu Palsule and I, was Rehumanizing Leadership, was this realization really was Rosabeth Moss-Kanter, who wrote an amazing article back in, I think it was 2011, called How Great Companies Think. How Great Companies Think. 2011, Harvard Business Review. Really good article. And in it, she differentiates between economic the economic, value or the the logic of the business, which we know from good strategy frameworks. Economic logic is sort of the money machine. How do you actually sustain the ability to create returns above the cost of capital over and over and over again? Very hard thing to do, by the way, right? And it's not to be trivialized. It's a necessary part of enterprise sort of thinking that we have to have economic logic. But she goes on to say there's also something called the institutional logic of the firm. Now, this is where it gets really interesting because the institutional logic is the ability to create the conditions with society and people that allow you to flourish over time, right? Now, if I think about creating value above the cost of capital over time, and then creating the conditions with society and people, including employees, including stakeholders, that allow you as an enterprise to flourish over time, those two things are going to be in tension. There's going to be conflicts between them. But they also work really well together, right? Because if you don't have economic logic, you don't really earn the right to ever ask the big long-term question about institutional logic. Yeah. On the other hand, if you only focus on economic logic, the problem is at some point, you're going to be blindsided by either a reaction to your company, by society, by the local communities in which you operate, or by employees and stakeholders. And we've seen lots of institutional logic clashes really in the last, I'd say, 12 to 14 years. The first real wake-up call for us on institutional logic for me was when we started to see things like Occupy Wall Street or Occupy the City of London. I was living in London at the time and walking through the tents around St. Paul's Cathedral, that were basically saying capitalism is dead, right? Now, I think that's an overreaction, but I also think it's a wake-up call that capitalism was missing a great deal of this discussion around institutional logic. And what institutional logic, if you back up from that and say, all right, let's realize that we've got to think more broadly than just about our ability to earn economic pecuniary value in our company. We have to then ask ourselves the question, what are we here for ultimately? And that thing that we're here for has to be something bigger than just money. Otherwise, you're not leaning into the institutional logic question. Also, and I think this is where, Gen Z is telling us that we have to pay attention to this. Right now, they're not the first, but they're the first large cohort that's actually saying, this is what we're looking for. And that leads us to that leads us to the question of how do I, as an individual, align to that enterprise purpose. But I think first and foremost, leaders of large enterprises have got to address this question, and they've got to do it in a concerted, disciplined way. It is not a communications exercise that you outsource to a comms firm to write you up a nice purpose statement and then put it on the lobby wall of your firm, right? In fact, one of my clients, which I wrote an article with about and with, is Udit Batra, the CEO of Waters Corporation in Boston, Massachusetts. And what he talks about is, I don't want to write the purpose down. I want to be very purposeful as a company, but I don't even want to write it down. He's trying to defer that as much as possible because he's worried that the minute you write it down, everyone's going to say, that's it, done. We've got a purpose statement. We're fine. We don't have to think about it anymore. And this is the great danger where a lot of companies that we looked at fall down, that in fact, it doesn't ever really get embedded in the way they work. It doesn't become part of their DNA. And the companies where it becomes part of their DNA did a lot of work to embed the meaning, the narrative of purpose, and look at it from various angles of their business and have it attached to their business so that it's part and parcel of the way they think about how they operate their business. That's what our conclusion was, and we offer some methods for how to do that for companies. And I've worked with several companies in trying to narrate purpose and really align around the underpinnings of that purpose statement. The statement is not the thing. It's everything that it means to everyone is the thing that's going to allow it to be used. One of my clients, ANZ in Melbourne, Australia, was the one who really woke us up to this fact that when you start to use purpose to make big strategic decisions, trade-offs, for example, exiting markets because they're not aligned with our purpose, that's what ANZ did. That's when employees and society and stakeholders really start to, and regulators in this case, start to wake up to the fact that you're serious. And that's the key kind of ingredient that we have to think about when we're building enterprise purpose. Now, if you really kind of back up from that statement, what you're left with is an explorate purpose is an exploration of our shared authenticity as a business. Like it's really who we are. And once you kind of know who you are, you know what to say yes and what to say no to. That's kind of the way to think about it at a very high level, I think. And here's the thing. We looked at a lot of purpose statements and we didn't find any huge, obvious formula to writing a good purpose statement versus others. There was not a lot of variability in the quality of these purpose statements or purpose narratives. There was a lot of variability, however, in the degree to which they actually embedded purpose in the organization and used it for large-scale strategic decision-making. And that's where we realized it's not a comms exercise, right? It's a narrative exercise. It's an embedment exercise, and therefore it's a leadership challenge.